Hello and welcome to the Special Interest Show. I am here, I'm Rose-faun and Angelica, and I am here with Happy Turtle, Thomas.
Yay, I'm here again, of my own free will.
There we go.
Um,
Yes, no, we are up here of our own volition.
so, can you explain to me why I am staring at by
What
black?
are you staring at, Dylan?
I
What
am.
do you refer to? How would you refer to this image?
Um,
Describe it.
I would refer to it as cursed. Um, it's a it's a it's a drawing of trans as Thomas Jefferson as a trans man with a Hatsu. Wait, that's
Mhm.
Hatsune Miku. He's got a Hatsune Miku binder. I just noticed. Oh
Yeah, he
God,
does. Have you seen this? Have you seen this image before?
no, I haven't.
So this is known as Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson on the internet, and you were right. Well done for identifying it as Miku. Yeah. So for listeners who might not have seen this iconic piece of artwork, it is a drawing of a version of Thomas Jefferson, similar to the representation of him played by Daveed Diggs in Hamilton by Lin-Manuel Miranda. He's got a t-shirt on saying, "I met God, she's black." He is wearing a binder that has pictures of Hatsune Miku. The kind of how would you describe
She's a
her? She's
Vocaloid.
like a idol, right? A Vocaloid. There you
Yeah,
go.
which is
She's
like
a Vocaloid. It sounds
it's
it
like a
sounds like a slur.
no. The slur against them are like Vokies. That's the slur.
Oh, you know the slur against them. Okay,
um,
but she's like a VTuber, but like she makes music, but she's like not real,
yeah, it's like I
right?
guess it's like her voice was like the first like synthesized voice or something. I don't know. I
Mm,
just
I don't know,
she's
but she's
just
there. She's
yeah.
part of this.
There's also like a
Um,
list of things next to him, like furry taking Japanese lessons. Uh, dated
yeah,
Angelica. I can't read that before his transition.
Skylar.
Her dad
Mm-hmm.
had no idea. Calls her Angie. Obsessed with anime. It's just John's
One of the
former
few people
drug
who can get
dealer.
away and live. Yeah,
John, as in like
yeah, yeah.
John Smith, like
Used to be addicted to cocaine.
tattoo art.
No, as in John Lawrence.
Okay,
Um,
as if that makes it any better. This is cut. What you still haven't answered.
flamboyant, loudmouth, and bad of love.
Why am I looking at this? Why have you
Why are you looking at
exposed?
it?
Yeah, why have you exposed me to
Um,
this psychic
do you have
damage?
any? Do you have any ideas what this episode might be about?
No, um, just
Well,
like
this is
Tumblr.
your clue for this general topic, basically. Yes, it's linked to Tumblr. I will just skip to put you out of your misery. Skip to the next slide. I have titled this the ooification of historical figures. That's how I describe this phenomenon. Um, and as you like, I've also included some other pictures on the slide of like cartoony, like ooh, cute, like anime, like kind of representations of historical figures. You've got Marie Antoinette, Queen Charlotte, King George III. That's Lafayette, Marquis de Lafayette. You've got Robespierre. That's another big one in the Tumblr fandom. And then Thomas Jefferson with, I think that's James Madison who's holding him. Uh,
What? So,
so yeah, this is something I've noticed. As like you were like good to notice, point out Tumblr. Like it's such a Tumblr phenomenon. Like, so what's your how exposed have you been to this kind of interaction with historical
so,
figures?
okay. The only thing I'll say, and I'm surprised I'm actually admitting this because this is a shocking confession. But like when I was in secondary school, I used to watch
Yeah.
Hitalia, if you know what that anime is.
No, I don't. What is
So
it?
it's like it was this anime where like all the characters were personifications of countries and they like reenacted history, but it kind of had like this ooh kind of side to it. And like Italy was the main character for some reason. It's a cursed as hell show. It's cursed.
This looks incredible.
There was like a movie as well.
Oh,
It was
wow.
weird.
And it was a manga. Yeah, oh, incredible. Similar vibes, honestly. So, my confession from being a teenager was that I was very into Hamilton the musical. I don't know if you've seen Hamilton the musical.
No.
Probably for the best. I mean, I enjoy it. I think it's still. It came out on Disney Plus recently. If you do want to watch it, and if any listeners want to watch it, I had to watch it illegally at first, and then I actually did go see it in 2018 live in the West End. It actually was really good. It's one of the few musicals. It got my dad into musicals. Got him actually engaged in it. It is a rap hip hop musical following this sequence of events from basically the Revolutionary War in America to the like establishing of the like founding fathers and like of the US Constitution, focusing on the central figure of Alexander Hamilton. So I just wanted to give a bit of clarification, firstly, about what is uwu. That's how I think it is said. I've seen different pronunciations, but everyone I've heard like say like, oh, uwu, small bean, that's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
Like uwu.
Yeah, I've not seen a different pronunciation of uwu. Do people
Yeah.
say it? Is it like a GIF thing?
Yeah, well, I saw it was just on the like Urban Dictionary or whatever I was looking at. Like the suggestion was something like Uwu or something like that. It was like it was weird, but Uwu I think is the way it makes the most sense. And it's all related to the like emoticon of like a U, a W, then a U that looks like a little face doing a
So
little. I don't know how would you describe the little mouth?
it's like, yeah, it's like meant to be like that anime like cutesy smile. Like it's
Mm,
not really a
yeah,
human expression. It's like meant to be like a cat, like
yeah.
a cat's mouth.
Yeah, it is. It's that kind of wiggle of like, well, because that's the thing. It's meant to mean it means like, oh, cute, but in that kind of anime, like, oh, it's so
Like
cute and like, oh.
kawaii.
Kawaii is very linked to like, yeah, like how I think kawaii is used, like very popular in like fandom spaces, like fan fiction. The first proven use of it was in a Yu-Gi-Oh fanfic. Interesting enough, in 2005. And I love the little author's note for this. This is the first known use of this term. Again, feel free to throw squids and fish at me. Ooh, I deserve it, you know. Which just
Like that comes off more smug to me though. Like, yeah,
yeah,
I don't care what you think of me. Like, brush his hair aside. Also,
yeah.
how long has that child? Like, I'm sorry, I swear I've been looking at the slide. How long? How long has that child with the uwu sign been there? I swear to God that wasn't there before. What the fuck?
It was, it was. It just it comes on with the second click. I wanted to jump scare you with it.
You did. I feel like I get what the fuck. I can we go to the next? Oh my God, I hate it. I hate
Yeah,
it.
we'll go to the next slide.
It's staring into my soul.
It's like this anime, like yeah, basically like make like very stylized, looks like a child with like the big eyes and cat ears as well. Because again, there's also kind of a furry association with the term uwu.
It always
Did I say
comes to
furry or
furries.
fairy?
You said furry.
Okay, I heard fairy when I said it. I was like, hang on, what have I said here? Um, but yeah, furry association.
So I've gone to the
Uh,
next slide. I'm sorry that I'm kind of causing this jump all over the place. You know what? No, I'm not even going to talk about the picture. I'll let you, because I've jumped the slide. There's just so much shit that has been like beamed into my eyeballs.
Wait, are
Okay.
you looking at the Why Write Fanfic slide?
Yeah, I'm writing. I'm looking at that slide, and I just anyway.
So this was the next discussion point. It was about fan fiction. What is it? And I put an image in there, which I can only do my best to describe. It is. This is what came up when I searched fan fiction and went to images. It's from I think some one of those like big like online news organizations like doing an article about like why fanfic is so popular. So you've got in the background you've got Steve Rogers and Wonder Woman kissing. You've got well in further back you've got the Eye of Sauron. The TARDIS is there. You've got a
You can't not talk about the. There's Spock and who's the other
Captain
guy,
Kirk.
and Captain
Captain
Kirk,
Kirk.
and Kirk is pregnant. Like you
Yeah.
can't just like stop describing this image as if that's not like the main thing you see.
You've also got Harry and Hermione as Jedi. I think that's Edward poking in at the side, doing a really scary face. I think someone is wearing Princess Leia's bikini to the left as well. It's a man's face on there, but I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah,
But anyway, yeah. I felt it was an accurate reflection of what fanfiction is, which one of the definitions I found was that it's rewriting shared media, particularly like TV or like film texts. And it kind of originated with like science fiction, like fandom in the 1960s. Hence why I wanted to have the Spock and Kirk like
Well, isn't that
picture
where
because
like Mary Sue comes from as well? Like, wasn't she like a
yeah,
character in Star
I have
Trek
no
fiction?
idea. Yeah, I mean, it was a massive early fandom. Like, I think there's, yeah, like it's been really studies. Like, that was what kind of really kicked off fan fiction as a genre. But yeah, so like fan fiction or fanfic, it's all about it's like using other people's characters basically. So you're borrowing the intellectual property to make more stories. So like you can't publish fan fiction legally. There are some published fan fictions, like famously After by Anna Todd, which was originally a Harry Styles fan fiction, but in order to get it published, she had to change his name in the book to Hardin, which is just the most stupid decision. It's hard. What a name,
Why
Hardin.
not just Barry?
Uh,
That's just one
Barry, yeah.
letter. Although Barry's not really a
Yeah,
sexy name. Like, I imagine this is smut
no,
just because it's a Harry
it
Styles
is.
fan.
It
Yeah.
is. He's like a bad boy with tattoos.
Yeah, you couldn't be a Barry and be a bad boy. Sorry to any Barrys who's listening, but like, look, do you have any? Actually, if your name's Barry and you have a tattoo, comment down below.
Hit
There'll
us
be
up.
no
Hit us up.
comments. There'll be no comments because it
Because
just
there's
doesn't happen.
no such people exist. Yeah, true. Um, but yeah, like so that's basically what fanfiction is. I don't know what your experience with fanfiction is, whether you, in the deep depths of your past, have
So,
read it.
so when I was like really into Star Wars, I used to watch Star Wars theory video. I'm doing like the quotation marks with my fingers.
Right,
Theory
right.
videos. It was like, oh, what if Anakin didn't turn to the dark side? And they like
Mm.
these channels won't call themselves fan fiction, but as I grew up, I was like, that is totally Star Wars fan fiction. Like,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just
it
describes
absolutely is.
itself as
Yeah.
like masculine theories. This isn't girly fan fiction. This
That's
is
a good point. It probably is like them trying to the masculine alternative because fan fiction is definitely very gendered. Because I remember as well, like talking to one of our mutual friends once, and talking about fan fiction, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I read like Lord of the Rings fan fiction." I was like, "Oh, I did too. Like, what kind of ones did you read?" And he was like, "Oh, I read about one from the point of view of an orc." And like what it would be like to be an orc in Sauron's army, and I was like, "That is not what I have read. That's not how I engage with this. This is basically a
oh,
different thing we are engaging with here."
also, I read all of My Immortal. That I've also engaged with that.
You did?
Yeah. For added
My Immortal.
context, I've not actually watched or read Harry Potter, so my biggest exposure to that franchise is My Immortal, and I am adamant to keep it that way.
See, that's a whole other topic. That is an important part of like fan fiction, folklore, history, because the folklore surrounding My Immortal is insane. But anyway, so I kind of think of Hamilton the musical as fan fiction, basically, like historical fan fiction, and this is how a lot of people have engaged with it. It was you haven't seen Hamilton, right?
No, I've not seen it, and I
Yeah.
also this is like a week. So I have a history degree, but like Revolutionary America is one of my like few blind spots, so I don't even know much about the
For
actual
once, I
history.
can be an expert because I have seen this show multiple times. I have listened to the soundtrack. Like to this day, I've still memorized parts of that soundtrack because I listened to it so much in 2016. So the original show premiered off Broadway in 2015, but it was like 2016 when it got really popular. They released like a album for the song for the songs for it, and also there were plenty of bootlegs going around online, which I watched obviously. And then also I went to see it in 2018 at the West End when they did a West End run, and they've released the Disney Plus version as well. So in 2020, so it's quite like mainstream, I'd say by this point. A lot of people will know of Lin-Manuel Miranda. Anyone who's kind of engaged with musical theatre, I guess, will know him because he did In the Heights as well. I don't know if you heard of that musical.
No, I am like a philistine when it comes to like fiction. I don't listen to music. I don't watch any TV shows. It's like if it's not real, I don't care. So very little engagement on my front.
Well, this is kind of real though. It is. Yeah,
Wait,
so this
America
leads
is
me on.
real?
America is real. You know, Alexander Hamilton was a real guy.
What?
Not all of these people on Tumblr know that, apparently. There's clearly not a great comprehension of it. But yeah, so it was based on a biography, basically, 2004, about Alexander Hamilton. And the whole premise is that Alexander Hamilton is a lesser known founding father of America. And again, I'd never heard of him. I didn't know very much at all about revolutionary America before this. And now even now I have a very base level knowledge of it. But one of the big things that comes up immediately when we talk about Hamilton, and indeed like just the whole Revolutionary War, is slavery.
Oh.
And if you'd like, Dylan, do you want to just do a click onto the next slide?
I have. What is that like? Black Thomas Jefferson as like an uwu like cutesy slave?
So an important thing about Hamilton the musical, which I haven't mentioned so far, is that all of the main cast are played by people of color, right? Like, and that was one of the big reasons of making the musical. It's a hip hop musical, and Lin-Manuel Miranda himself is Latino, and like all of the main characters are played by people of color, and like that's an ongoing thing. Like now when they do different runs, like the only white people you'll see would be more of the background or minor characters, because it was a point of doing that. And so Thomas Jefferson was played by Daveed Diggs in the original version, who also played Marquis de Lafayette, and he was very popular. He's like a very charismatic, like charming man, very great, like brilliant performer, great voice. So a lot of people latched onto him. Unfortunately, that wasn't always in the best way. He's a black man, for context. Thomas Jefferson in real life, famous slave owner. So already there's discussion that we can have there.
Yeah.
So it has been criticised by like black activists. Like, so one activist, Ishmael Reed, said, "Can you imagine Jewish actors in Berlin's theatres taking on the role of Goring, of like Hitler, Eichmann, like other kind of, you know, famously anti-Semitic roles? Like that just wouldn't happen." And so Reed's arguing basically that to have black actors playing slaveholder characters is like ongoing form of oppression, right?
Yeah.
It isn't, and then there's also been other arguments as well. I've been like, by casting people of color, you're kind of obscuring the actual like dark past of it. And obviously, it's been an ongoing discussion, particularly with like Black Lives Matter, right? Of like, how do we think about these slave owners? And America, particularly, and England, really venerate slave owners. And so then casting a black man as a slave owner is at least like a controversial choice. And there's ways of
Yeah.
arguing around it. You know, we're going to talk more about the reasons why Lin-Manuel Miranda chose to do this and like the more positive sides of it. But one of the big issues, which is worth mentioning up front, is this slavery stuff. So there is slavery fan fiction about
Oh my god, I've just read the little like, so I saw the picture. I didn't even
did you
read
read the
the.
summary?
Yeah.
Yeah, read the summary out for
Oh,
the listeners.
you are a slave. You have been a slave for almost your whole life, but only now life has started to get worse for you. Your owner has started to abuse you and beat you.
Yeah,
Yet
yeah.
one day a man in a magenta suit walked into your life and changed it. Can love be an option for a slave? And
Yeah.
just that's just the fact that like Thomas Jefferson did rape his slaves and like
Oh,
had
he absolutely did. Yeah,
like
yeah.
that makes that why ugh,
Mm-hmm.
it's got the
Yeah.
romance tag. No.
Yeah, it's not only is it a fan fiction about like what it would be like to be Thomas Jefferson's slave,
A
it's
100-part
romanticizing
story?
explicitly.
How
Hang on, is it 100 parts?
Yeah, it says 100, but how fucking much did they write?
And 257k reads. I didn't even notice how many reads it has.
Humanity was a mistake.
So yeah, so I found this fan fiction basically through a really interesting article, which I recommend. I'm going to put in the sources link by Cora Dobson. She has a really interesting blog. But so she was talking about. She basically made the argument. This is like a 16-year-old basically. He's making this argument, which I thought was really interesting, very nuanced. I think this was a 16-year-old, but basically arguing like there's no way around it. Like this is whitewashing history. It's completely romanticizing these horrible slave owners already, particularly when America already idolizes these men. And she makes this argument like it's fine to enjoy media, but like the musical is glossing over the horridness. It's not just a case of being like, oh, these are flawed people. It's like, no, these were slave owners who like you say, like assaulted their slaves. The other interesting one was by this blog, Tallulah Thoughts, I think you say that, or no, hang on, by this blog, Tallulah Thoughts. And she basically talks about her experience in the fandom, the Hamilton fandom, about how many slavery fan fictions there were. So apparently on AO3, Archive of Her Own, very popular fan fiction site, 71 fan fictions are tagged as Hamilton and slavery. And there's even more on this one that in the picture is Wattpad, more on Wattpad, more on Tumblr, more on fanfiction.net. A lot of them are like the main character is a slave, which is interesting. And a lot of these people writing these fan fictions are white as well, which,
Yeah,
um,
it's
this is just so many elements to it. And the other thing she kind of highlights are like, there was a lot of bullying against black fans who would call out this kind of problematic behavior. There was a lot of fetishization of the non-white cast members, of like, so not just like the ooh, like, you know, that's more kind of like infantilization, right? But particularly like hypersexualizing black men in the show, which again, bad.
so
Um,
I'm reminded. So I did my dissertation on like the folklore of white supremacists,
right.
and in my research, I found there was like quite a lot of basically this just what you're talking about, fetishization of black
Mm,
men, slavery POVs, but it would be from like it's like without all the ooification
right.
applied to it,
Right.
and I kind of hate how there's like this horseshoe theory almost with like
Yeah.
hobbies. Weird how like these patterns kind of repeat even in like vastly different spaces.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah, you're right. And a lot of these people participating in these kind of, you know, really questionable fan fiction interactions would kind of have this veil or this like disguise of being like, oh, we're so liberal and like love people of color and like we're so inclusive and and it's like, and then the second they're criticized or called out by actual like black fans or other people of color, then they're so like, you don't understand it, and then this is when all the bullying comes in, and it's so defensive and it's complete like just like virtue signaling of like, oh, this is what I think, this is great, and like you say, it is actually still the same underlying racist behaviors that are manifesting through this. It's yeah, so that's not good.
That is
But
not
to
good
move
at
on,
all.
it's heavy, but I need to get that out of the way because that is something that just comes up throughout it, and it's, you know, you've got to talk about that when you talk about
Well, yeah,
Hamilton fanfic.
if we ignored it, we'd be doing like what Hamilton did, just like ignoring the slavery.
Yeah, right. And so I guess this is an issue that does pervade a lot of other historical fiction as well. Like, you know, the number of these, I've got a picture on the next slide of like one of those stereotypical historical romance novels, you know, of like a duke ravishing this like beautiful woman. And the number of those who have like really dodgy views towards like people of color and like really fetishize black men in particular, or like Native Americans, or like, you know, anyone they see as like dangerous and savage, and it's like, oh, this
Is
is bad.
there? Do you know if there's any examples of like the Irish being fetishized? Because if you look at like how the Tudors depicted
Mm,
the Irish, it would be in this like exoticized, fetishized way, like similar to how like Native Americans are still depicted today. So,
yeah.
like, do you know if there's like some story of like, I don't know, like a big buff Irishman like ravishes at like an English countess or something, or
Yeah, no,
did you not come
absolutely.
across that?
No, it is. I've definitely come across that before. If like, because again, it's often in the historical, if you're looking like 19th century kind of historical fiction, it's because it's they're seen as like you say, as a bit more kind of like other, like, and like, oh, look at these like uncivilized Irish, and it's all those kind of attitudes that come through in it, and like you say again, like the idea of being big and like Irish laborers, or like you still see it, I think, even today in like modern romance novels. Like, I mean, I don't read any of them, but the number of ones you see where it's like Outlander copycats, you know, that are talking about like Irish dukes or whatever the equivalent was, or it's all this kind of like exoticization. But it's strange then coming from within the UK, isn't it? It feels
Yeah,
it's not, yeah,
because they're just our ginger neighbors from like the
yeah,
UK perspective, and so it feels
yeah,
weird to apply like this. It's like when somebody has like a crush on your sibling and you just don't get it at all because you're like,
yeah.
what the hell, no.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. It's like you don't see it. It's different. It's the different ways that it's perceived, and particularly with Americans as well. The Irish are romanticized, and because you got all these Americans who are like, I'm actually Irish,
Yeah, and
and they're
it's
like whip out a family tree, and it like goes back like 20 different generations before you get any Irish blood in you. Like, so it is. Yeah, it definitely is linked to that. Yeah, I was so like the thing with like historical fiction versus fanfic, I think it's really interesting, like that line. Like a lot of historical fiction isn't necessarily focusing on real people. You get some that are like, this is about Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn or whatever, but often it's using the time period as a background, right? But it is similar to this concept I think I mentioned before of real person fic, real person fanfic, which can be defined as like writing fan fiction basically about actual real historical figures. And there's a lot of like, it's a really interesting way of doing history actually. Like I think it's a form of like folk narrative, really, this kind of historical fiction, because you're researching, you're absorbing all this history, but then you're putting it into a certain narrative format with its own conventions, like, and you're picking and choosing which bits you're drawing out, and it's not meant to necessarily be historically accurate as well, which is the interesting thing. But then you get different parts of fandom. You're like, oh, that isn't accurate. You get like, there's certain things people are really picky about, right? Like you read and see historical fiction, and they're like, oh, I can't, like people be like, I can't believe they described the dress that way. That's not what the dresses were like, and they didn't actually wear corsets and da. And then you're like, yeah, well, they also couldn't just go around like waltzing around with random men either. Like this also couldn't happen.
what
Like they pick and choose what's actually meant to be historically accurate,
it's
which is
like.
interesting.
What's the film? It had Heath Ledger in it, and it's where he becomes like a jouster. It's like Pineapple Express.
Oh,
No,
Pineapple Express.
not. But you know
I
the
don't know. I know what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
the I'll add the name of the film in post, but like the plot of the film is Heath Ledger like learns to become a jouster and like becomes a knight, and it's set in the
A
Middle
Knight's Tale.
Ages.
A Knight's
Knight's
Tale.
That's it, Knight's Tale.
Yeah.
And it has like a very modern poppy soundtrack, and loads
Mm.
of people complain saying no, you have to have like an orchestra and like violins and stuff, and it's like
Yeah.
those instruments weren't invented either. They were like 500 years
Yeah.
later. It's like, so it's still inaccurate, but it has to have the
Right.
facade
You're
of
exactly
accuracy.
right. It's the facade of accuracy. You're so right. It's the same reason people, because like Great Gatsby, right, is also a very stylized historical film. Like they have like modern hip hop and like pop songs and stuff in that, and it's all meant to like give a frame of reference of like, okay, this is what. If you play 1920s music to a modern audience, you're not going to see it as all this glitz and glamour and like this kind of like culture of partying, because that you associate with like outdated, like, oh, it's old people. So they put in modern music to help like create that image in the like in the viewer's head of like, okay, this is a very extravagant, like luxurious party environment, right? And obviously it's not, they weren't listening to will.i.am in the 20s, and it's the same kind of thing. Like there's all about how these facades are constructed. So I thought it was interesting because I found a thread on Cora, how do you say that, Quora.
Yeah, I've never
um
heard it said out loud. It's
no,
what replaced Yahoo Answers in my
yeah,
heart.
but it was about basically whether Hamilton was problematic, and like because they're real people, which is just very loaded topic, obviously. And one commenter was like, nobody's going to read Elizabeth Schuyler and Maria Reynolds being lesbian roommates in college and think, oh yeah, this is completely true. Which, like, yeah. And I think their argument was like, it's not about all this fan fiction, the way the like audience engages with Hamilton the musical and with these historical like people. It's not meant to be about like reality. It's about like adapting these historical figures and like reinterpreting and reimagining them in modern settings. And that's the idea of AUs, or alternate universes. I don't know if you're familiar with that term,
Yeah, because
but
like I get a lot of the
yeah.
Star Wars videos that like the Fury ones would like build on each other, and they'd have like different AU playlists. It wasn't fan
Yeah.
fiction. It was manly theories. It wasn't fan fiction.
Man. Yeah, it's exactly the same, and that's actually where the we're going to go more into it, but yeah, that's where Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson comes from. Is a college AU series of like these character sheets for a Tumblr blog. So yeah, I think of it more as like a folk narrative, like a kind of way of storytelling rather than meant to be accurate. And so I think like that's how we've got to approach it when we're looking at like Hamilton and how these like online like fandoms are engaging with these characters. But it does lead on to the question of glorification and romanticization of these figures. Because the founding fathers, not super great guys. I don't know if that's a controversial statement to say.
Well, I mean, we're in the
But
UK, so they're all traitors to the crown. They should all be hanged for treason. So it's not controversial here.
no. Can't believe you just doxed us as being in the UK.
Yeah, I'll like beep it out, and I'm sure people won't figure out from traitors to the crown.
Yeah, so there's a lot of debate online about whether Hamilton and also the way that people engage with Hamilton through this like ooh fan fiction and fan art is romanticizing or glorifying these historical figures.
So
So
what's
like
the
the main
difference between
right,
romanticization and glorification? Because to me, they're like kind
yeah,
of the same thing.
yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to put them both in there. In my mind, I think romanticization is more about how you're interpreting the past, right, and looking at it with these kind of almost rose-colored glasses of being like, oh, it was great back then. You know that you get these people who are like, oh, I wish I lived in the 50s, like,
Yeah.
or I wish I was in this time period. And you're like, it's kind of looking at it and just kind of ignoring a lot of the negatives. In my mind, then glorification is more of an active like praising of the perceived positives. Like romanticization is like ignoring negatives, and glorification is being like, oh, look at all these great things these people did. These were great people, and these were the best, and literally like putting them up on a pedestal. Like it feels more active to me. I don't know that that's how you was,
Yeah,
if
so
that's a distinction other people make.
so like romanticization is like ignoring that slavery happened with like the case of like
Yeah,
Hamilton, but glorification would be like it's a good thing that slavery happened.
right, right. Or being like Thomas Jefferson was a great guy, and he was a good thing he had those slaves because it helped the economy and
I
whatever
hope
arguments
no
people
one
make.
takes this out of context. Like,
Yeah, clip that and get us cancelled before you even got like our 3 episode mark. Um, but yeah, that's the argument, and like a lot of fans of Hamilton will argue, oh, it's not romanticization because Hamilton is actually highlighting the flaws of like these characters, and they say so. This one quote from someone on it's Clyde bitches on Tumblr. I love reading that Tumblr username to an academic context. Um, to romanticize or glorify something is to present it as unjustifiably good, to idealize it unrealistically, and work to make it more appealing than it actually is. That doesn't happen in Hamilton. And the argument was like Hamilton is about how these characters are all complex. You know, it presents and it shows Alexander Hamilton cheating on his wife, and it obviously presents that as a bad thing. And like you see the flaws, and yet you kind of see him as how like he wasn't the perfect person and all this stuff. And then there's people as well that a lot of the arguments will be, oh, and it does acknowledge slavery though. And the
yeah,
interesting thing is, it does technically, but I don't know if you've ever heard any of the soundtrack of Hamilton. It's very fast paced because it's all based on rap, right, and hip
yeah.
hop.
I've
And
heard the "How Can You Write" song. I don't know what it's called. How can you write this?
how do you write like you're running out of
Yeah,
time?
that's that. I've
Yeah,
heard that song. I've not heard anything else soundtrack.
interesting that that's the only one you heard. Yeah, so like a lot of it's being fast paced, and a lot of the information is delivered like any kind of what would be cabinet like debates are conveyed in cabinet rap battles. That's how they convey it, and a lot of the information is conveyed through like fast paced, rapid paced songs because you've got a lot of history to pack in, right? And there are mentions of that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves and that Alexander Hamilton was anti-slavery, but he was anti-slavery in the way of like he himself didn't own slaves, you know, but he didn't
Yeah,
really advocate that hard against it, and like he was still benefiting from slaveholders, so it isn't really, it's not a focus, it's not mentioned. And like I can understand maybe why you didn't want to, if you're telling a story with people of color in playing these like historical, very powerful, rich white characters, you don't want to necessarily then be adding an extra element of like, oh, and slavery's bad if like you don't have the scope for it.
well,
But
I'm
I don't think it's a good argument of saying like, oh, it talks about it though, because like it doesn't really.
the thing I'm thinking because put like one of the quotes, putting aside the work Lynn did, reclaiming that history. I'm like, did you ever watch Jojo Rabbit?
No, but I heard a lot about it.
So the person who plays Hitler, imaginary Hitler, is a
Hmm.
Jewish actor, and he
Yes.
does a lot of things that like IRL Hitler didn't do. Like, he eats meat, he smokes,
Mm.
all these things. And when asked in interviews, he basically said Hitler doesn't deserve the like accuracy. Like, I don't care enough about him.
Mm.
And to me, that depiction is like a really good example of a Jewish actor like not reclaiming that history, because I say that history has been claimed,
Yeah.
but kind of an example of like a person, a minority playing their oppressor in a way that is kind of empowering to the oppressor,
Right.
like as
Well,
kind of a
that's
counter
yeah.
example.
That's a super interesting point because it leads on really well to my next slide, which is about fan fiction as protest. Because this is kind of what do you like my picture?
Yes,
Do you like my
sorry.
picture?
So it's for an event saying storm the Thomas Jefferson Memorial and put a Miku binder on it. They can't stop us all, and then it's like a very poorly photoshopped edit of a hit of a Miku binder on Thomas Jefferson.
On the Thomas Jefferson statue, yeah, it's great. um, this was part of how like it's obviously it's satirical, but how the Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson did gain a lot of like popularity on the internet. I think it illustrates this pretty well because there's a lot of the argument around Hamilton is that it is a form of protest, right? And that by placing characters of people of color into these solely white characters and redefining these characters and integrating hip hop and other styles of music into this musical, you're kind of rewriting history and you're reclaiming this narrative from the people who the oppressors by the oppressed people. And right, because like the founding fathers are such a powerful like myth in the US, right? It's one of the big ones along with like Thanksgiving and like Christopher Columbus and like, the whole discovery of America. It's so foundational to their sense of identity. Because you think about how often do Americans reference the Constitution? Oh, this was the founding fathers said this and da. Like it's so important to the sense of identity. So to then I think it does make it a really powerful tool and like period of history to then make a political point with by integrating contemporary race politics through the casting choices and also some of the issues that are discussed. So I do think there is an argument to be made that you can reclaim the narrative.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, this Hamilton has functioned to make the founding fathers more popular. And as you
Yeah.
talked, when POC would point out like, hey, this like this is problematic, or like they own slaves, they would then just get bullied by presumably white fans. So
Yeah.
to what extent has it actually like protested or reclaimed? Or to me, it just seems like it is just strengthened the founding fathers' like cultural presence by
Yes.
giving an outlet for probably liberal-minded people to still venerate them without it
Yeah.
actually being like, actually they're quite problematic. It kind of feels like
Yes.
a controlled outlet rather than a real protest.
Yeah, is personally how I kind of see it as well. And like, I definitely do think that there is something interesting that Lin-Manuel Miranda is doing with it and placing people of color at the forefront of this narrative. But it's like why are we still repeating the narrative though? Like, why do we still need to be retelling the story of the founding fathers in a way that does glorify them and does make them come out as heroes? Like, as much as Alexander Hamilton's presented as he's got his flaws, right? He's the hero of the piece. And there's a whole bit at the end, which we'll talk about more later, about legacy and like who tells your story and like Alexander Hamilton's legacy. And I think Lin-Manuel Miranda really did see himself as kind of carrying on the legacy of Alexander Hamilton. It's like, why do we need to be repeating this and perpetuating this legacy when in fact, like there's a lot of other actual people of color who have played important parts in US history, who could have their stories told through this kind of pop culture like phenomenon, right? And it's very palatable for a white audience still as a thing. Like, yeah, you're using hip hop and rap, which I think is objective. That is good because I think it has exposed a lot of like white people to those genres and made it a bit more like mainstream, but it's still in a much more palatable way. It's the kind of thing where people will be like, white people can say, "Oh, I don't like rap, but I did like Hamilton," because like the content, the topic is like a lot more respectable and does it.
Yeah, it doesn't
You know?
it doesn't integrate a new audience into that genre. More, it uses that genre to carve its own niche out and almost like wall itself off. But like as you were saying, people are like, oh, I don't listen to rap, but I do like these rap songs written by Lin Manuel. Manuel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, yeah.
To me, the choice of music is just like an artistic choice. Obviously, that like
Mm-hmm.
art is political, and there is the connotations to that. If you're viewing this as like, what is this doing for the narrative of America and race politics? I don't think the choice of music impacts it that much.
No, I don't think so either. And this does kind of lead on to my next thought, which is about how meaning shifts with media, because there was an interesting backlash almost against Hamilton during when it was released on Disney Plus in 2020, because you're in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously, people have more time on their hands because it's COVID anyway, so you could kind of get more involved in this kind of discourse. But there was more pushback against it because it's celebrating slave owners, and you get more. A lot of the articles I referenced were from around that time, and then discussions as well about if racially blind casting, which is, I wouldn't say that's what Hamilton's doing, because I think it's very intentional. They're very intentionally casting people of color in the main roles. You know, you're not just saying, oh, we want a black person for this because of this reason. Like, there's many different people of color who played the different roles. But how that meaning shifted, because originally it was very celebrated. When it came out in 2016, everyone loved it. It was great. It was like very woke, but still in that kind of like Democrat, very liberal sense
Yeah,
of like wokeness.
I wonder if the idea of America shifted between those, because in 2016,
Mm,
yeah, it was released while Obama was president. You had the first black president. The
yeah,
prevailing narrative is like, we did it, we defeated racism. And this idea of America as the shining city on the hill was kind of seen as
yeah,
like, yeah, we've overcome that obstacle, which is how a lot of liberals viewed racism, as like this
yeah,
obstacle rather than the systemic
yeah.
construction. But by 2020, we had 4 years of Trump, Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of sort of consequences and like deteriorating race relations in the
Mm-hmm.
country. So I think at that point the image of America had shifted, so it was no longer
Completely.
seen as the city on the hill, it was seen as the systemically racist country.
Yeah.
Also, I think we're understating COVID here, because like if you're
Mm.
locked in a house and the person is a drama kid, a music theatre kid, and they're just doing nothing but playing Hamilton on repeat, that is going to shape your perceptions of it.
It is. I fully admit, I did make my parents sit and watch it on my laptop because you couldn't get Disney Plus on my TV at the time. So I made my mum sit there and watch it. I was like, what do you think of it? Good, isn't it? Um, but yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that you brought that up about the 2016 election, because that was something that, I don't know if you know Jane Mulcahy on
not
YouTube. She's like a video essayist.
not personally, no.
I have to send you some of her essays, they're brilliant. But she did one recently on Red, White, and Royal Blue. I don't know if you've seen about this, about
No.
they made a film of it. So it's a film on Amazon Prime at the moment, based off a book, and it's kind of an alternate universe where the prince of England, like the son of like the king and queen of England, falls in love with the first son of like the son of the American president. And it's a gay story, and like it's really sweet actually. It is a really good rom-com, but it's very naively hopeful. And it feels very pre 2016 to me. I think the book was released then, and Jane makes this point of like, before 2016, when we had Obama particularly, there was this kind of naive faith in like, oh, we can reform government systems from the inside. And like, so it comes out in Red, White, and Royal Blue at the end. Not to spoil it for people, but it's a rom com. They're going to get together.
What?
They get they get
A gay
together.
romance story has a gay what?
Well, at least they don't die. Like, to be fair, that's the expectation from gay romances, isn't it? Um, it is actually a positive outcome. But they get together, and basically they end up, the royal family, the British royal family, accept their son. He's not the heir, but he's like the Prince Harry equivalent, right? They accept him being gay and being in a relationship with the first son of the United States, like publicly, and people know that. And it's like, that would never happen. Like, can you imagine our monarchy suddenly deciding, yeah, actually, with the amount of faff they made over the divorce, like, they're not going to just accept that. Like, and
I
even if they do tolerate it's not really reform, is it? Like, that's not really possible.
I feel like for me, it's a bigger like leap to have the like American people accept the
True.
president's son dating royalty, because I take
Yeah.
it this is like set in the 1800s, like round
No,
17.
no, it's set in modern day.
Oh, okay, okay, not as. I feel like okay, I take it back. I thought it was like kind of meant to be historical, and I feel like back then the
No,
people wouldn't have
it'd be
accepted.
so anti-British.
Yeah, well, more like anti like nobility and royalty, because there was quite a lot
Yes,
of like
true.
at the time like bills and amendments being suggested, being like anyone who accepts like knighthood should be barred from all of America, and like things
Mm,
like there was like this big like
right.
anti-title fervor. But if it's like
Yeah,
modern
yeah.
day, I mean, people want to crown Trump as a king, so like it's no longer really there.
They do. But at the same time as well, can you imagine with like the current political atmosphere in America, like people accepting a gay like first son? Like
Yeah, like if Hunter
what's
Biden.
Biden's son called? Yeah, I was just gonna say if Hunter Biden was one.
I, yeah, the right would just never shut up about it if Hunter Biden got
No.
engaged to Prince Harry.
Yeah. So it's very but then they would people Jane was basically talking about how it would be it's a very different like political and like atmosphere right now, right? Like because we've had Trump, like and that whole illusion of like, oh, like it's all based on like democracy and like you can reform the system. Trump just proved that that's not true and that like any like crazy enough like guy can get into power and just completely like mess things up, revoke all these motions that are in place and like threaten to nuke countries, and there's like very few repercussions, right? So I think it was interesting then like seeing the reaction to Hamilton in 2020 when people were a lot more cynical, because again this other discussions, this Tumblr user, what if what is a username, I think is their username, hard to read.
That is hard.
They argue,
What
oh,
if
what the
is
fuck is a
oh
username? It's
what the fuck?
what TF is a username.
Oh yeah, okay. That
Yeah,
is
that's what it is,
certainly
I
a
think.
username.
Um, but they argue, they kind of compare it with how Ryan Johnson, made Glass Onion for Knives Out, the second Knives Out film.
Yeah.
And he intended, if you've seen that film,
No, it's been on my watch list for all time, but it's also fiction, so I will not watch it on my own.
we should watch it. It's good. But with the main like characters in that, it was originally meant to be, by Ryan Johnson said, was meant to be a stand-in for Mark Zuckerberg. But then by the time the film was released, everyone was like, "Oh, this is Elon Musk." So even like it's interesting in seeing how these like cultural like developments and the atmosphere and like really impacts how we perceive that media and what we project onto it. So that leads me nicely back to Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson.
I, I assume that this was made like ironically as like a reaction to
No,
like
no.
ex-
So let me
I
explain. You have the context now of what Hamilton is, all the kind of issues surrounding it. Let me give you a timeline of this. So, me and Thomas Jefferson was
so I'm just mentally recovering from the fact that this was like made because the art I quite like the art. There's like a lot of effort has been put into this,
it's genuinely
and
pretty good. Yeah,
and it's like not a shit post. It's like
yeah,
yes, this is my perception of the man who raped slaves.
yeah. No, it is, which is why I used it as a vehicle for this. This is what prompted me to make this, because I was like thinking about that. So it was made in 2017, so like the year after Hamilton started being showing, right? On a Ask blog, for like a Hamilton Ask blog. For context, like though it was it was relatively popular, not so much now on Tumblr, to have blogs dedicated to just people asking questions, and you'd have various kind of admins or mods or however you describe them who would then answer these questions about that media or whatever. So this is one of those blogs that had multiple people who would like respond to these questions, but it was called Ask Cram Master Ham. Ask Cram Master Ham. I don't understand it. It was posted by the user Umbroni. I
Okay.
assume it's linked to bronies. I don't know though.
Well, I was
It
more
might
thinking
be someone's name.
Umbreon from Pokemon.
It could be. It could be a play on both of those. Who
And
knows?
Umbreon is a dark type, which in Japanese is
Would
evil type. So I think that would maybe
would
explain.
It's just evil Pokemon posting this. It was posted as part of a series of fan arts for an alternate universe depicting the founding fathers. I think it was like a coffee shop AU, I want to say.
Wait, there's
I
more.
can't remember exactly now. Yeah, there is more. I think that's the trick. You have to Google them in a bit. I think I did originally put some more in the PowerPoint, but then it was getting too many slides. But if you type in Umbroni Hamilton fan art, you should be able to find the other ones.
Yeah, I need to like self-harm comes in a lot of forms, kids. And sometimes it's looking at okay, Bing is just saying no, you mean Umbreon. So I have to let me go to Google. Bing is just not letting me view it. So let me. Oh my god, Google! Why did I subject myself to this? That just. Okay, I'm Xing.
Do you see the Alexander Hamilton one?
I did. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I again, folks, your friends can do self-harm in a lot of ways that may not seem obvious. Keep a lookout for that. Anyway, so yeah.
But anyway, close that tab now. Yeah. So it wasn't a coffee shop one. It was a college AU. And it is important to know. It's something we haven't really brought up so far is that a lot of the ways that these characters were presented, the uification, would involve these characters being imagined as queer, right? In some way.
Yeah.
Like for this series, they've got the little flags, and each of them had their identities and their pronouns, and like this is the thing, because like a lot of the I think it is reasonable to have backlash against this. I'm like not gonna pretend it isn't.
I feel like it's like
get a lot of people who,
like bipartisan things, because like you know, us like on the left, we're going to be upset for all the reasons we talked about. He's a horrible figure, but then I feel like we can find some common ground at the right, because I mean, do I even need to explain why the right would be upset with this?
Well, yeah. Well, this is the thing though, because a lot of you did get a lot of people being like, oh, like, why are you making them gay? Like, this is so terrible, and it's like, okay, that is more of a complex issue. Like, the issue isn't that we're imagining these characters as gay, because to be fair to the fan people, there is some evidence in some of the letters, but not Thomas Jefferson, but some of the characters of like homoerotic implications. And like, obviously, it's hard to like judge that kind of, particularly if it's just got letters, like to judge that by modern standards and like label historical figures as queer in whatever way. There's discussions to be had about that. And this, in my mind, is more about like making these characters identifiable to an underrepresented audience, right? Like if you're a 17-year-old like queer kid on Tumblr who's just got really interested in maybe their special interest is Hamilton. Because let's be honest, probably a lot of those kids were also, yeah, a lot of these kids were probably also autistic. I think it definitely was my special interest for a while. Not as insane as this though. But they just want to make these characters relatable to their own situation, right? So there was a lot of like targeted harassment for that whole aspect of it. But yeah, so posted 2017, a lot of criticism immediately, taken down 2 weeks later. Skip forward to 2019. Umbroni makes this kind of statement on Instagram. I do want to read you most of this.
Okay.
Because it's just very interesting. On Instagram earlier, I got so much hate for drawing Thomas Jefferson in a modern setting and transgender. I turned off comments figuring it'd solve the problem. Someone DM'd me saying that I was romanticizing a man who owns slaves, even though he's a fictional representation of a real person who's been dead 100 years now. And it's an AU. Lynn himself has said that Hamilton is a retelling of America then by America now. So it's only right we get representation for everyone. There's literally tons of trans versions of Alexander Hamilton, and they get little to no hate. Why is whenever I do something, I get torn a new one? I like to break the mold, and I got shit for making my modern AU Alexander gender fluid too. Anyway, the people on Instagram. I don't actually blame this much on the fandom, but more so on the SJWs that sit on Instagram and repeatedly refresh the Hamilton hashtag and claim they aren't SJWs, but they're clearly SJWs because that term comes to mean something negative, and they're sitting there acting negative as hell. Anyways, they tried to preach to me on the history of oppression of black people by the characters from Hamilton. And the best part is, when I told them I was black, they said, I'm sorry, I didn't know, and literally didn't have a leg to stand on. They didn't stop, though. They shifted gears quick as hell and tried to attack me for making these characters uwu, which means queer, I guess, or whatever. They kept hampering on about the fact that he owned slaves and that he was a horrible person, the real, dead Thomas Jefferson. They keep denying the existence of the character in the musical, even though that's literally who's pictured. I told them if they felt such guilt that they had to dig up the issue of slavery from 200 years ago, something that my people never forget, but we don't hold as a card over the head of every fucking white person that we see. And they should have so much concern for the condition of the black community among oppressive whites. They should volunteer in shelters and help my people who are hungry. Okay, fair point. Instead of digging up issues of slavery that even blacks aren't focused on anymore because we're dealing with present day bullshit, why don't you all contribute to the end of all racism by getting out of your house and ceasing attacks on people just trying to draw characters from something they love, having fun on the internet?
So there's a lot
So,
to
a
take
lot
in
to
there.
unpack in that statement.
But I kind of get the feeling that somehow, despite making this person may be a bit on the right of the aisle,
Yes.
given how
Yeah.
is it a him?
I've seen he him pronouns be used.
Okay.
I'm not sure though.
I'll use they just
Yeah.
to like, but given how they talk about like SJWs, the way they're kind of talking about the race card, I
Yeah.
feel like this person's on the right. Also, listening to them saying I'm drawing a fictionalized version of a historical character, it just reminded me of Plato's allegory of the cave. Like this is the shadow they saw in that cave was Thomas Jefferson, weeaboo drug dealer.
Yeah. No, completely. It is. It's a lot of mental gymnastics, I think, going around. Like, because it's just so many levels to this that they're saying of like, okay, it's a fictionalized version of the historical character, but not only is it that, it's a fictionalized version of the fictionalized version that is in Hamilton the musical. So like, they're basically saying like there's multiple steps of removal from the actual Alexander, not Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, right? But it's a lot of like, it feels a lot of mental gymnastics to distance themselves from that. And like obviously, like, you know, like as a black person, they're entitled to reclaim parts of the history that whatever they want to do. But you're right, a lot of the language did strike me as very right wing and very much like, well, slavery is not even the current issue now. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean we don't care about it. Like it still impacts everything going on with modern day race relations, right? Like
yeah, I also not to like psychoanalyze too much, but I feel like they made this because they wanted to, and then all these like justifications in that are kind of like them just upset at the backlash because there wasn't like a clear argument. It
yeah.
was just kind of like they thought of one thing, they thought of another. It's like, have you ever had an argument with like an ex over text and like they just keep coming up with arguments why you should like get back together and you could tell it's just whatever comes to their head, they just like put that in. It's
Right.
like, oh, I'm good at cooking, and oh, like we've got this thing planned on that day, and oh, we've got this and that, and it's like, okay, you're just throwing out whatever you can think of.
Clutching at straws. That's never personally happened to me, but yes, I get what you mean. Of like, yeah, it could never be me. No one's ever fought to get back together with me. People have just broken up with me, so it won't work.
They just like go, oh, I'm gonna get some cigarettes, then you just never see them again.
Yeah, literally. But yeah, no, it is. It's very clutching at straws. But then the last thing I was to mention before you wrap up, the last 2 points on this, my timeline are June 2020. So Brony criticizes ACAB, which like on Twitter was basically like, oh, like you know, it's not all cops basically,
Oh my!
and like
I just I I'm struggling because I see this image and I first think joke, but then you tell me it's not a joke. So then
yeah,
I think, oh, okay. Like I would imagine the person who have made this would be like the most like stereotypical like ultra like
yeah,
left with like somebody who like not like anti ACAB, anti SJW. Like I'm struggling to like comprehend how this
yeah.
person exists.
I know it's so confusing because there was part of me that I was like, this definitely is real, right? Like, but the fact that like it may come out as like one of the like kind of a My Immortal situation where, you know, people are like, oh, it was all just a prank all along, and like it's all just like this kind of long con of like, but I just genuinely think that people are just like this on the internet, unfortunately, particularly on Tumblr, and it's you just get the most bizarre stuff that comes out. Because again, like I think the internet did feed it by making a lot of parodies. Like I've seen a Donald Trump one version of this, a
I
Ben
need to.
Shapiro one of this. Find the Ben Shapiro one; it's hilarious.
Okay, what would I need to type into Google to get to get
Ben Shapiro, Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson. I would
Ben
say.
Shapiro Miku Binder? That might. Oh my god! Just.
You found it?
Yeah. I'm putting this.
So this is a parody.
Alex
Yeah,
Jones'
that's the one
former
I thought. Yeah,
drug dealer.
yeah.
Okay, back to topic.
But yeah, so there's obviously a lot of parody of it, which I think again a lot of it kind of makes people more defensive, right? And a lot of these people on Tumblr who like are more higher profile fandom, like people can get quite defensive when they feel attacked. And if you already have that mindset of like there's SJWs that are like, because you do see this, like I've noticed it with like a Sims YouTuber I watch using who is like a gay man and relatively liberal, but saying, oh, the SJWs will get triggered by this. And you're like, this is the language that is being used, like, get to trivialize people who have your views and for like you as a gay man. Like, why are we turning this against like other people in this such like an intense derogatory way? But people just do that, and it's another way of like
Wait.
saying, "Oh, you're being too sensitive," and like, yeah.
There's Sims YouTubers.
Oh yeah, I watch a lot of Sims YouTubers.
I
Yeah.
like because I get the appeal of the Sims, but like a Sims YouTuber, to me, it's like going to your friend's house and then watch them play with the Barbie dolls, and you don't interact at all. Like I.
Well, you're not autistic. That is what I enjoy. I would
Okay.
get my mum. I would literally get my mum to act out little plays with my Barbies. I wouldn't play with her. I just watch her do it. I get her to do a one-man show for me. I love watching other people play the Sims.
Okay, so I was completely on the money. I just, it's just, I am not neuroatypical, so it doesn't appeal to me.
It literally is that. I mean, I watch a lot of them do news and stuff as well, right? Or like the new packs coming out, like
Oh,
what's going to be in it? What's the, you know, and like, is it a scam? All of them are scams. But
I mean, it's
or
like,
I'll do reviews.
it's like 500 to like get all the Sims DLC now, isn't it? Like, it's like obscenely high.
Because like each of the expansion packs are like 35 quid. Each of
Oh
the
my
game
God.
packs are what, 15 quid. Like they're like worth it. Each expansion pack basically costs what you pay for a game. So it's insane to me thinking of like I got myself in such a mindset of it because like I want to get Baldur's Gate, right, but I can't really afford it right now. So I keep looking, I'm like, oh, 50 quid, like it's a lot of money. And then a new Sims expansion pack come out, I'm like immediately paying that 35 quid for just like horses or something stupid. Like it's a special interest, all right? I've got to buy it. I'm committed.
I'm not judging. Okay, I buy little plastic figures, so I'm not.
You buy your little dudes that you paint, yeah. But anyway, yeah. And the last thing on the Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson timeline in 2021, Aaron Burr, his Wikipedia page was vandalized to include multiple references to Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson, like saying that, including a line that said that Burr gave Jefferson his first Miku Binder.
I love the term "first Miku Binders," like as
Yeah.
if there's like multiple. Like you can tell which season you're watching by which Miku Binder he is wearing.
But yeah, that's the end of my timeline for that. You can probably see why I chose it. It's like a case study for this topic.
Yes.
So yeah, my final reflection, I guess, is about so the idea of legacy is really big in Hamilton. There's this whole quote in "The world was wide enough," saying basically, legacy. What is a legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. When he dies, his wife like talks about all the stuff she did to keep his legacy going and telling his story and such. Like it's such a big important part of the narrative. But I saw a really interesting Tumblr post, which was actually what got me thinking about this, saying it's been long enough that I can look back and honestly say the Hamilton fandom shipping the founding fathers was fantastic, actually. Like, okay, cringe, problematic, whatever, but in the context of Hamilton being all about legacy and who tells your story, lol, Lamau even. And I do think it is interesting of like just thinking about how these guys were so focused on their legacy, and this is what they got. And it
Yeah.
feels kind of a bit like karma to me. This is what happens, and it's an interesting like case study as well, on like how out of control you actually are of your legacy. You can do all you want to set up a good economic foundation for a new country with its independence from its overarching monarchy, but
And
you still end up being a weeaboo drug dealer.
yeah, you still
Like,
like you can't escape a Miku Binder.
life lesson of this. So yeah, that has been my exploration of the Urification of historical figures. What did you enjoy it?
I
Is
I
enjoy a word that you would use?
I experienced this. It was interesting. It was certainly special.
Yeah,
I
a special interest, if you will.
yes, we could make a show out of this.
We could.
I feel like again, I feel like I like how someone in a Lovecraft novel feels when they like see the uncomprehendable horror. Like I kind of feel like that is where I am at like the gates of
Are you
madness.
saying Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson is cosmic horror?
Yes, Miku Thomas Binder can solo Cthulhu. Like
Miku Thomas Binder.
the whole Lovecraft mythos. Yes, because I do really like the artwork and the eyes. I will say, like,
I do actually really like the drawing style. I think like it's actually a really talented artist. And if you do Google like Umbroni draws, like their other like art is actually really good. It's not an issue of skill. It's an issue of everything else.
yeah, it's an issue of like why.
But yeah, do look it up. Do look more into it. There is way more to it. I explained to you already, Thomas, that I played this choose your own adventure, like kind of RPG style game, but also
Yes.
graphic novel about the French Revolution. And it is in that kind of like anime kind of style. But it's a lot more self-aware of what it is. Playing that got me into like, okay, I'm gonna like read a bit more about the French Revolution, which again, benefit of Hamilton. Like I now have a basic understanding of the founding fathers thanks to Hamilton, which I wouldn't have had before. But then yeah, I got looking up into French Revolution, and in full admission, I still go on Tumblr every evening to relax. It's a relaxing site now.
I mean,
As obviously Robespierre and the terror is like, it's a very controversial topic, and Tumblr's great for controversy. And just the number of like smuts and uwu style fanfics and like fan art and people being like, Robespierre never did anything wrong, or Robespierre was evil. I don't know why you're all justifying it. And like the amount of debate, I was like, oh, this is a whole other topic in itself. Like,
yeah. I mean, I have seen a lot of like people romanticizing Robespierre, but I
yeah,
guess in the more like I want to follow in his footsteps, not I want him to serve me coffee while smut happens.
yeah, yeah. I know. It's a whole diversity of engaging with history online, isn't it? And it's all valid. It's all forms of really folk narrative and folk
I,
history.
I I wouldn't say all of it's valid. You know, it's your episode, so go off, Queen. I guess
it's
it's all
it's
there.
certainly there.
Yeah,
It's
it's
certainly there.
there, and I think it contributes to the greater conversation.
It
Positive or
does.
negative, I think that is another conversation in and of itself. And I guess I we need to put a hit a Miku binder on the Thomas Jefferson statue.
That's the plan of action. So yeah, sign up petition down below to get that done. Putting the meat goodbye on statue. Actually, I think we should put them on all historical figure statues instead of taking down statues of slave owners. We should put Miku binders on them.
I just like just get like Tumblr to write the little like bit of writing at the bottom of statues where it'd be like, oh, this was some great general, and instead it'll be like, yeah, this was a AFAB queer pansexual,
Drug
because
dealer.
yeah, because then the Confederates would just tear down all those statues themselves. So
That's
like
so true.
it's like a
That's so true.
win-win. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you enjoyed this episode, learn how to like make Miku binders for statues, and do
Yeah,
your civic duty. Also, like, comment,
exactly.
subscribe, do
Like,
all the
comment,
YouTube things.
subscribe,
Is there like
all
Spotify
of our links.
things?
Yes, but well, Spotify, yeah, subscribe on, follow the podcast on Spotify, rate it as well. I've got a rate option, helps boost us.
But yeah, so if you've enjoyed the show, tune in next fortnight for the next exciting episode of
The special interest show.
Woo!